welcome, Lars.
Thank you.
Not very often that I sit in the same room with a legend that sort of was at the inception of Google Maps. I'm sorry I haven't seen your presentation, but the audience has and is burning with some questions. Who has an immediate question? Yeah.
Why Athens?
Oh man, I wish you had asked with all the other people in attendance. Well, so look, I looked carefully at all the cities in the world, and I have identified Athens as the next big thing, not the current big thing. And I'll give you just a couple of reasons why I think this. It's because I went to Athens in 2012, so a decade ago. So my wife is from Athens, that helps. And we went there considering, should we move ourselves and our tech business to Athens? Because we know, I mean, it's, you know, a top tourism destination in the world, lifestyle is unbeatable. And I gave a talk. This was, you guys remember the financial crises, and I don't know what it was like here, but in Greece it was really bad. And I gave a talk at a TEDx about Google Maps and how it all started with the stock market crash, and I argued now's the time to start your Google Maps, right? And then we toured the ecosystem of startups, and it was a really short tour. Like, there was nothing happening and people were super depressed for good reasons, right? I mean, you could only get 50 euros out of an ATM every day, and there were lines around the block. And the banks had all died. And so we decided not to move there, also for some other reasons, but we decided not to move there. Give me just 1 second. And then 8 years later, 2 years ago, we were living in New York, and we're just like tired of the madness there. I hope there's no Americans, but America is, you know, like a dying empire. Political polarization, police brutality, riots in the streets, didn't handle the pandemic super well. It was just like, this was crazy. And so on a whim, we went back to Athens and expected very little, but when we came back, we found that it had gone from zero, their ecosystem, to quite a lot. So 700 startups, 10 active VCs, the first couple of unicorns was just about to be minted. They have been now. Fantastic government support. And our minds were just like blown by how quickly this had grown. And we think actually that that part of it was not despite that economic crisis, but because of that economic crisis, because it really does make the citizens of the country and the whole country like more resilient, more entrepreneurial, more willing to do crazy things, including like changing laws that are difficult to change in an old country and so on. And I think if you look at the size of the Greek ecosystem today, it's not super big compared to, you know, Stockholm or Lisbon or, you know, the big cities like Berlin, Paris, London. But if you draw that trajectory, and if you optimistically believe that can keep going or even accelerate, Athens will without a doubt be one of the most important innovation centers, startup centers in Europe in 5 to 10 years, right? And it's just like I encourage people to you know, work with early stage startups, in particular in that phase when the rocket is taken off, like as an ecosystem. Athens and Greece and the region around it, which I count, you know, Bulgaria, Romania, the Balkans, it's a rocket ship, and it's taken off in a big way. And actually, what I found myself doing a lot now is not just evaluating startups and investing in startups and helping startups, but actually looking at the whole ecosystem. And it's part of the reason I was excited to be invited here, to get to look a little bit about how do people build successful tech conferences, because I think that's one of the things that I can help create in Athens to help accelerate that growth. And actually, so this is more like the observations so far, right? But living there, it's also, I think the pandemic has helped the world get uprooted a fair bit, right? And think a little bit more about life than we might have otherwise. And this idea that you should look for a place that combines an amazing lifestyle with an amazing set of professional opportunities, it's just become more popular, right? And so more people are willing to move to, and actually it's a particular goal of mine to encourage more foreign techies and entrepreneurs to come to Athens. like myself, even if you don't happen to be married to a Greek god. It's a goddess. In my case, it's just a magic place to live. Long answer.
Any
Short
other question? Long answer, yeah, but a good question, I guess. Yeah. Thank you.
What was your first thought, if you still remember, when Larry kind of suggested that you need to rewrite your Google Maps application from that C++ into a JavaScript so that it works in a web browser? So I started to develop code in that period, and I'm really curious, what did you think when you realized that, yeah, you have something probably very good, but it's not in the form that the future requires it?
Yeah, it's a super good question. And you know, when I'm on stage and time is limited and I have to be a little bit entertaining to the extent that I can, right? So I greatly shorten the story, right? And the thing I don't have time to explain, that inside our little 4-person team, there had been some tension. So, good hearty discussions about what role the web should play and what role, where's the web going kind of thing, right? And some of us championed this thing that the web is like at the end of its development and it's going to be all back to apps and so on, right? And others, and I was maybe more on that side, was like, look, the web is just starting, right? And it's that ease of not having to install applications is going to win. And we had actually, so we built that C++ application, and the map itself was native code, which made it really fast, pretty big, like my brother wanted, right? And then we had stuff on the map, markers, and when you clicked one, we wanted to show some cool information on top, right? And so that information we showed, I kid you not, by embedding a web browser into the application, right? And so we used HTML to display whatever we wanted, right? And that's actually so then we needed some plumbing between the C++ application and that little hanging web browser, right? And that's when we started learning about JavaScript. And we started reading these funky blog posts from our friend, the DHTML dude. I'm hoping, one day someone will stand up and go, that was me! I'm the DHTML dude. I haven't met him yet. And so I knew just enough, right? And we'd had just enough discussions already on the team that when Larry said that, I was like, hell yes. Hell yes, we can do this, right? And so I knew exactly where to go look, and I knew exactly how to do it. And there was a lot of on the team is like, are we destroying ourselves here? Are we, should we let go of this thesis? Like the number of times I had said to investors that maps cannot be better on the web, and therefore you must do this, right? And then now we were like gung-ho disproving that very thesis, right? And you can imagine, I often think, what if we'd done that earlier? What if we had tried it out on our own and showed that to investors? Things could have played out supremely different, right? Anyway, good times.
Not related to the maps, but why do you think Google Wave died?
Were you in the presentation in there? Yeah, but so I try, it's in a nutshell. I mean, we made a lot of mistakes, right? But like a few mistakes you can recover from, but we made so many mistakes we couldn't recover. And the key one was about market fit. And we fooled ourselves into believing we had market fit because all the people we showed it to was like ourselves, right? Standing ovation from 5,000 people. Everyone loved it. Everyone was just like me. There's not a lot of people like, us in the world, but enough that you can fill a room with 5,000 people. And it's hard to, have an experience like that and conclude, oh my God, we're in trouble. We're doing something terrible when the whole room is like applauding you. And we've done the same. We've done internal demos at Google, gotten the same response. I remember distinctly one person working at a data center was like, oh my God, Lars, you're going to destroy the web. This is going to be it's going to be so popular that the web, the internet won't be able to handle it, kind of thing, And every now and then we'd run into someone saying, this is very difficult to use. And we'd be like, "Well, go away." You know, and the thing we were not doing, someone was asking me earlier, you know, how do you know when to listen to negative advice? You know, don't do this, this is not going to work. Early on, actually, so we heard that a lot when we did Google Maps. It wasn't Google Maps then. A lot of people told us, this is not going to work, people are not going to like this, there's no money in maps, don't do this, go home. Right? And we ignored them all, and I developed this theory that when you're an entrepreneur, if you don't have someone telling you that it's not going to work, then you're not being ambitious enough, right? And I love saying that, right? So, and I often offer to be the person telling you that's not going to work, so that you know that you're being ambitious enough. That's a joke. I don't do that, but it turns out, right, that if the person who is telling you the negative feedback or advice is your target customer, you should maybe listen to that, right? And that's what we failed to do, and that's why it collapsed, honestly, right? If we had either been more conscious about what our target audience needed in the space of communication. It's such an obvious thing to me now that I can't believe it took me 4 years and $30 million to learn. And so I'm hoping, you know, this will be easier, although I'm also, you know, often advising people not to listen to negative advice from people like me. But like, you know, my brother and I, enjoy building things for ourselves. Right, because we're introverts and we don't have to talk to anyone else, right? So we build it, but that really only works if your needs in the space are well aligned with the market you're trying to address, right? And so Canva, my best performing investment by far, right, does not have that property. It is a professional graphics designer specifically making tools for amateur designers, right? But she's very conscious about this. And in fact, her story was that as she was studying to become a professional graphics designer, she made her money by teaching people in her community in Perth, Australia, how to use the existing tools. So we're all Adobe, right? And she tells the story that someone would come to her class, a hairdresser with a family-owned salon in Perth, who couldn't afford to hire a professional designer to design their flyers and whatnot. And so they'd come take her class, and it would take them 6 months to learn how to use Adobe's tools that would then cost $2,000, or you could download a pirate copy, right? Just to design a flyer. And she's like, that cannot possibly be the way it should work, right? There must be a way to build a design tool where this woman, this hairdresser, can just like go and design a flyer like this, right? And then she she tested this out in a niche of yearbooks. And they built a whole company on yearbooks where teachers could go design the yearbooks and then put all the pictures of the students, the text, make it pretty, and then press a button. And then Mel and Cliff in their mom's basement had some printers, and they would send physical yearbooks back to the schools. And that's how they kind of learned what sort of user interface can the non-professional designer that cares about aesthetics use to design something really quickly. And that's really the root of Canva, and it's crazy, right? So that's my super long-winded answer to the like, know your market, design for your market, and that's why we failed. Yes.
Thanks. Okay, one more. I'm also having a burning question.
Hi, Lars. As you know, I'm an entrepreneur, and so really specifically to Canva, I study the deck. Really, the deck or the slide that really interests me, and I've always wanted to ask you, is they have multiple categories. Anyone should be able to be a professional graphic designer. It saves so much time. We all use it. I use it. My team uses it daily. Our interns use it to create marketing materials daily. So in all the different categories, it has consumers, professionals, all the different categories. Where did you, from a product market fit, where did you start off, and when did you see initial traction? When did you see that there was so much interest from the average user like myself that you thought, okay, this is going to completely scale? And how long did it take to realize that?
Okay, so first of all, I got involved with Canva a year before they raised their first round. So Canva very famously, you know, they had 200 meetings with investors that were all no, until finally my friend Bill and the people around him, including me, pretty much invested the money, but that took the year of me finding the tech team that they would be okay with, right? And so it took a long time. And one of the things actually, and this you should understand if you're entrepreneurs, right? Then investors, you pitch someone in an hour, it's actually really hard to evaluate a startup from just seeing them at any one point in time. Right, and getting to spend, in this case, a whole year, you often don't have that luxury, right? But getting to spend some time and seeing the entrepreneur in action and seeing their progress, right? That's the really killer way to win over an investor. And in fact, even back when we were trying to raise money for what became Google Maps, there was one VC that got interested, right? And we met with one partner, and then they brought us back to some more partners, and we did like 4, 5, 6 meetings before we covered all the partners, and we came up with this rule. I will answer your question in a second, but this is too much fun to let go of, that every time we did a meeting, we made sure there was a new feature in our prototype, so that the host who had seen the previous demo would go, oh, that's new. Right, so that they could see that trajectory. Anyway, so they had already proven out some of the ideas in the yearbook company that they kind of just like set aside, let it run itself. But the traction came almost immediately when they launched, and then they took a long time launching. And at first, it was only about individual consumers that wanted to do something work-like. And this included the small business like that hair salon kind of thing. And they did this particular user test over and over and over that guided them towards when they were willing to launch. And the user test was the following: that you get someone off the street, make sure they're not a professional designer, and you put them in front of Canva that hadn't launched yet, and you tell them that they have 5 minutes to design a flyer for their birthday or a poster for their shop or something, right? And they only got 5 minutes, and then they only looked at the result. Like, they didn't really observe how they interacted with the tool. They only looked at the result, and if the result was not attractive to and Mel is a professional designer, right? If it didn't look good, then they would go and figure out how could the tool allow this person to design something unattractive in 5 minutes, right? And then they would go back and mess with the features. And a lot of their theory was, this is how she pitched it way back a year before they even started writing code, right? It's like, Lars, if you pick a particular shade of red for your design, and then you ask us to show you a blue, we will only show the blues that are color theory equivalent or compatible with that red. Or if you put a tiger on your design and you want a lion, if the tiger is clip art, we're only going to show you clip art lions, and so on. Same with fonts, right? And so then they would go back and do this. And so I thought it took them a long time before they launched. And I was brought up at Google, and Google has this thing about launching early and launching often. And it's a popular phrase in the Valley that if you're not embarrassed by your first launch, you waited too long, that kind of thing, right? But Mel was like, we're not launching this until consistently in 5 minutes people can design attractive things. People who are not designers, right? And then when they launched, it just took off like a rocket ship. I mean, they hit 1 million active users in just like a year. I know it's not ChatGPT, right? But that's still quite amazing. And in the beginning, there was not a lot of monetization. Like, they monetized by they bought a bunch of like stock asset, clip art and stock photos. And then they actually built AI. This was the first real AI thing to kind of separate out things from all of these assets. And then they would sell them to you for 99 cents for single use. Where at the time, if you needed a stock photo, you could be charged $200, and then you can use it for whatever you wanted. But they would like take a thing out, sell for 99, and they started making just a little bit of money, and it just like took off and took off and took off, and people started using it more and more for work. And then they would like observe when they thought it was really ready for like hardcore work inside companies. And then they made a product. This is now 5 years ago, I forget, where a company can go and pay subscription money for a seat. And they added this feature, which they've made much better since then, but it was already magic, where the professional designers in a company can like code their design guidelines into Canva just for the users inside that company. And now you can go and design something pretty with Canva. You could do that before, right? And then you just like hit a button, and then magically your pretty design would be both pretty and compliant with the design guidelines of your professional design staff. And that, I mean, that's where all their money is coming from, right? So like, I think they're at $1.5 billion in recurring annual revenues now, and it's primarily coming from business subscribers. It's still small bit from consumers buying assets, a small bit from, they have a printing business. When you design something beautiful, you can put it on a shirt, and they send you the shirt, sort of like the yearbook thing. Anyway, I hope that answers your question. It was obvious from day one. And so they took a long time to get their company together, took a long time to launch, but once they launched, it was clear very early on. And I say this because back then, I didn't have a lot of money to invest, and maybe one of the biggest mistakes I made relative to Canva was to not follow up my quite small angel check. You know, and I try not to do this too much, but like, oh my God, if I'd just done this, then I'd be like, I've made this much money, and then because it's still been quite a good financial outcome for me, of course, to be that early on. So yeah.
Hello, thanks. I have a question around generative AI. How do you see it in context of Canva going forward and outside, like in general?
Can you ask again? I missed the beginning for the door.
I have a question on generative AI. How do you see that in the context of Canva developing, and how do you see it in general?
Yes, that's a super good question. And I swear, when Mel, the non-techie, met Lars, the techie, and pitched her thing, it was all about generative AI. And how really she was going to make consumers make design easy with AI. And I was like, yeah, AI can't really do that. And then I was like, but maybe it can do that, you know, so that there was something AI could do back then, right? But not the things she was dreaming of. And she was like, but it's going to be able to do that, right? And I'm like, sure. and so they have been wanting this, working on this internally for as long as I've been around. And so as AI technology reached the stage where, like, so, by the way, I'm blown away with this, right? That AI, it's a 50-year-old idea that's been under constant research for 50 years, right? And suddenly this year, or was it last year? It's gone so fast, I can't even remember. But like suddenly it reached a really true inflection point of being able to read and write natural language better than most humans. It blows my mind. I did not honestly think that was even possible. And it's crazy, but at Canva, it's like, what took you so long? You know? And then they're like all over integrating it, and you'll see, I don't know if you used Canva recently, but in the past 6 months or so, they have put generative AI everywhere. So everywhere you go in Canva, there is a magic button, and you just write some words, right? And it does, you know, write a presentation about the history of Google Maps. Or just, you know, write some, you've seen how this works, right? And so Canva is incredibly well positioned to take care of this. And they've hired a lot of talent. And a lot of the things that are now actual features, publicly available features, are not actually just integrating ChatGPT, but actually internally built stuff. Because a lot of this research took place in public, published papers, and academic kind of approach, right? It wasn't just all invented inside OpenAI. So that's great. Can I predict the future of this? Well, I don't think I can, because if you had asked me a year ago, will AI ever be able to read and write better than humans, I would have said, you know, no time soon, right? And so it blows my mind that this is possible. And it's the most exciting thing that's happened in tech for a long time. It's also a little overhyped. right? It's kind of it's really truly amazing, but still humans can overhype it. And I think actually, I'm going to say something that's half funny and half true, which is that I think it's one of the best marketing things ever done. Is that the people who invented the Chat GPTs are like, oh man, our technology is so powerful that it might destroy humanity. Come check it out. And you know, they have managed to. It may be not exactly like that, right? But like it's a really explosive thing to get the world to write about that. The end of days may be here, because we built this thing that's so powerful, right? And 100 million users in 3 months. It's kind of crazy. Where was I going with this? I don't remember. But it's super exciting. We're very far still. Here I go again saying we're very far from something when I've just proven I have no idea, right? But I think we're still very far from actual like AI, right? Like a machine that can think and reason better than humans. But I think that'll happen, and I think it's actually a pretty good thing. I think it's, you know, just another thing that makes humans more productive, that will create certain challenges in how we organize our society. Nothing new about that. Like technology has been changing economies and jobs for hundreds of years, right? I don't know if there's anyone here has ever read the Communist Manifesto, but like it's all about that 200 years ago. Like whatever you think of the conclusion from that, it was all about how technology is replacing workers. The one thing that may be different now is that the jobs that are being impacted are the jobs that belong to people that take part in public debate, which that may be new, right? And that's why suddenly the public debate, so suddenly we're worried about jobs disappearing at a different scale than before, but it's actually not new at all.
Great answer to an easy question. Yeah.
Earlier today, there was a talk about lowering the emissions base. Yeah, sure. Earlier today, there were talks about lowering the emissions based on changing how the traffic lights work. My question is, how hard is it for you to bring this idea into a reality? Like, are people actually listening to this, or are they not really caring for that? The companies
Can you,
that own
the beginning of your question, I didn't hear. I'm sorry, there's too much fun going on outside.
At the beginning today, there were talks about lowering emissions based on changing how traffic lights work.
Got it. Yes, I heard that part. Yeah, so I mean that's super cool that you can do this, and unfortunately, you know, those kinds of interventions won't get anywhere near even like slowing down the growth of emissions just from the growth of it's not actually technology, it's just like, you know, like there's a strong desire for all the people living in slums around the world to not live in slums, and you know, shipping is growing like crazy, and so these kind of incremental changes, we should definitely do them, right? But we should really focus on like big things that can actually solve this problem. And I'm actually super optimistic. Yes, we should have started earlier. Yes, we should put more money into this. But I think the world has actually reached a point of realizing that this is a problem that needs to be solved, the greenhouse gas problem, right? And I think we're going to do a bunch of cool things, and then we're going to make fusion work, and then we're going to electrify all the things, and it'll probably get a little worse climate-wise and pollution-wise, but I think in like 50 years or so, we'll look back at that's just not a problem anymore. You know, fusion is something I'm looking at a bit. It's a lot more money than I can afford to invest, but I think solutions like that, getting the power grids in place, working a little bit with some cement producers. So cement is one of the things that isn't immediately solved. The CO2 emission from cement production, which is about 10% of the CO2 emissions in the world, it's not just solved by cleaning up the energy source. And so Greece happens to have a very prominent producer, Titan, they're called. And And so those are the things that I think we should be focusing on that will actually solve the problem at scale. And like in a particular yardstick is we got to do something that like can lower emissions significantly more than even just the annual growth of stuff happening in the world. Like, I don't think it's realistic to like go back. You know, you go to the slums of Mumbai and tell people, yeah, we're sorry, but we can't build any more houses because we did, you know, all the rich people used up the atmosphere's ability to absorb CO2. It's not going to work very well, I think.
That leads a little bit to a question, is that like AI and now with the boost of generative AI, everybody goes sort of berserk and like, what can AI do? And Google, of course, at the core of this, you know, having awesome capabilities. So where do you start and where do you stop? Because there's a lot of ethics involved. You can do a lot, and and please don't go into it, we abide by the law, right? Because the law is very limited on this one. But you have opportunities to, you know, go either for, you know, greenhouse gases or world hunger or something in health, or, you know, and there's a long list of things that we really would like to solve in this world. How do you make a choice? What kind of guidances do you use?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I mean, ideally, you try to come up with the solutions that solve all of these problems, right? Like, so you mentioned world hunger versus climate change, right? It's unfortunately easy to imagine a way to solve climate change in a way that actually like creates more hunger in the world. But it's also not that hard to imagine a solution that doesn't have that property. Like, I think world hunger is profoundly an economic problem. It's not a technological problem, it's an economic problem. Greenhouse gas emission is a technological problem that I think has technological solutions, just like we created that problem with technology, right? Like, we invented some really amazing things like burning fossil fuels and creating energy that had this unfortunate side effect, but has also created everything we have and consider necessary in the world. It has all been created by this stuff. And so we just need to come up with better technology that can deliver all those things and more without destroying our environment. Did you notice how I didn't answer your question?
My question is a little bit of an open-ended question, and I know it's practically impossible to answer. But I was wondering, like in a Google setting, how do you discuss it? How do you rank that? Or even in a personal setting? Because they're impossible to actually compare. But there is a finite number of resources that you can use, and there's only so much you can do. Yeah,
no, it's a good question. And so we live in a sort of capitalist society, right, where each of us is supposed to like do our best on our own. There are days, I mean, people who are from this part of the world would probably not agree, right? But there are days where I think these problems might be better solved if we had more of a planned economy, where you could actually look at the big picture here and make decisions that actually got implemented about how much resources to put into food production versus making houses versus making sure we don't destroy the environment in the process. That won't happen, of course, in the time frame needed. And so I don't have a good question other than apply your skill to the problem you think your skills are most suitable to solve.
Any questions from the audience still? Because I think we exhausted a little bit. We enjoyed your answers a lot.
Thank you.
You gave great answers on even on limited questions.
Yes.
It was a great story that we can all learn from. Thank you very much for doing that. Looking forward to having you next.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. I'm off to the airport.